Thank you for listening to the 500 and Growing podcast and to listening to the incredible, inspiring stories of our guests. Our guests typically are people who live outside of 9 to 5, people who have found their calling, people who have found their gifts, and we go through their life and how they found their gift, how they found their calling, and how they make that their livelihood, and the nuances of that lifestyle that they've chosen. So one thing that could really help us is if you follow us on our Instagram, which is at 500 and Growing Podcast. And if you follow us on your preferred podcast platform and YouTube, and the links can be obtained at 500andgrowing.com. We appreciate all the time that you've given to us. And please share that with other people so that we can expand our reach and we can grow. My commitment is that we will bring incredible guests that are incredibly inspiring, but we need as many people to inspire as possible. And that means please share with people the podcast so that we can grow. This is the last episode of the second season. We have 10 episodes a season. And so we will be back in January. So we start from January to October, and we take off a couple months at the end of the year. Our podcast is a long format podcast. And the reason why we make it long format is so that you can really dive deep into the life of a person who has committed themselves to their gifts and to their calling. So we appreciate the fact that you've listened. Please enjoy our final episode of the second season. And we can't wait to share the guests for the third season that will be incredibly inspiring and will continue the quality that you've come to expect with the 500 and Growing podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and please enjoy
500 and growing
podcast.
Dedicated to the underdog, cause I see you. Working on your craft, getting strong, cause I see you. Ready to set it off and on, cause I see you. Correcting all that is wrong, cause I see you.
My name is Jesus Azteca 500 Sanchez. I am the host of the 500 and Growing podcast, and today we have Emi. Emi is a recording artist. She started her career in singing in church, and
that's right.
And then has also, gotten into singing in general. Recently traveled to Mexico and got to experience music down there, and has gone through the ups and downs of like being a musician with a family and then what that's like. And so we're really interested in hearing your story. And so, why don't you let us know, what was it like to grow up as little Emi?
Little Emi. I just first want to say I always love your intro to your podcast.
Thanks.
Well, little Emi, Emilia, she was, I'm the only girl in the family. So I come from a family of 6 altogether, 4 siblings altogether, 3 brothers and myself.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
Always the unit of the family.
Uh-huh.
But I basically grew up as the only girl. I feel like that sometimes is can be a trip, because most people would think, oh, eres la consentida de la familia, or like you're the girl of the family, the one everybody looks out for. And I'm like, well, you would think, but sometimes, at least in my circumstance, it was definitely more like my family wanted to steer me in the direction they thought was appropriate for me. So I grew up going to church, very Catholic based family, went to Catholic school my whole life from grade school up to high school, going to church every Sundays. And my parents, they met in the church youth group.
Oh, okay.
So
they were like super involved.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Since they got here, they both got here in the 80s. They met at the same church in Elgin, San Jose. It's like one of the first churches there, and definitely the most like Latino based community in Elgin.
Okay.
So they met in the choir, they got married, and then they had us, and we basically grew up in a very music involved family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. What was it like to grow up in Elgin as a little kid?
It felt like it definitely felt like community there. Like I said, Elgin to me, I think now I can kind of compare it to like Cicero. It's just very Latino influence, a lot of Latino businesses, a lot of Latino communities there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge music space there, both English and Spanish. I've seen so many artists or bands coming out from there, and it's like everybody knows everyone.
Yeah, you imagine that it's
everyone.
like it's a small community, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like you hang out with the people that look like you.
Basically, yeah.
So what's the makeup like in Elgin? Like, is it predominantly Latino?
Yeah.
Is it, okay.
I think now it's like 90% Latino.
When you were growing up, it was the same?
It started to grow like into that. Like in the early 90s, I think it was like half and half. Like, you know, most half of them were Anglo and then half of them were Latino. But now it seems like it's majority Latino.
Okay.
And I have seen more of an influx of Central and South Americans even now settling in Elgin, where there's more like Colombian restaurants, Colombian businesses. I've met a few Venezuelans. So that has shocked me a little bit coming back to Elgin, that I'm seeing like more of that, which is great. But I'm seeing the growth of all different Latino backgrounds now in Elgin instead of just majority being Mexican.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what's up. And so, yeah, what would, like, if you were to, if somebody was to close their eyes and imagine Elgin, what would they imagine Elgin to be in your experience? What did it smell like? What was it like? What was happening in the neighborhood?
Yeah. In the 90s, so I was born in 92. So I really saw Elgin all throughout the 90s and 2000s. In the 90s, there was a little bit more, like a little more gang violence in parts of Elgin. So I think my parents were worried about us getting lost in that. And I believe that's probably why they kept us so close in church and to keep us involved in church.
Especially with four brothers, you imagine
Yeah.
that, like, you know, I mean, I know that women get gravitated to gangs as well, but
Yeah.
the boys are the ones that are typically recruited.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was first my oldest brother, Udi, he's 2 years older than me. So in the 90s, it was mostly him and I. And then my two younger brothers came in the 2000s. Like my brother Mikey was born in 2000 and my brother Angel in 2002. So they were part of more of like the 2000s growing up. But even they saw still like a little bit of violence to where Mikey almost kind of got in a fight. And I think after that was where my mom really got freaked out. And she told my dad, like, I think we need to get these kids to just stay away from the streets and just do something with music. So my dad was a musician, or he is a musician. He was the one that taught all of us how to play music, from guitar to piano, bass, drums, at least the basic. And that's what basically got us involved in not only a church, but eventually to start our own musical family band. Ya ves, like tienen las fiestas, quinceañeras, kermeses. We would be playing those events in Elgin.
Okay.
We would do a lot of fundraisers for like the communities. And from there, it just started going. And we were doing it for like 6 years.
Okay.
Altogether. We were always just mostly with the family. Siempre. Okay. I was always with the family.
Yeah. And so, what was it like to have that dynamic of your father, kind of like the Jacksons, right? Where it's like they're kind of managing you and they're letting you know, like, and then discipline, right? Because I imagine as a young person, the last thing you want to do is like sit down and like do some stuff at times. And so, what was that dynamic like between your father and you and your mom?
I didn't like it at first, to be very honest. I was 7 years old when my dad first started teaching me piano, and it was for church. It was for the choir. I mean, I was young. I'm like, why are we doing this? But it was just something that I had to do. I had to listen to my family. And so I did that since I was 7 all the way up to 13, 14. I think at that age in my life, I'm a preteen, I did start to like music more, but I was more becoming of a music fan instead of a fan of playing music.
Okay. What kind of music did you listen to or you became a fan of?
I started listening to a lot of rock en español. I started listening to Caifanes,
Okay.
Zoe, Belanova,
Okay.
kind of a variety of both like rock en español and pop en español. So I was becoming more of a fan of music, and that's what made me want to learn how to play better music. That's when I started playing guitar.
Yeah. Well, you imagine that like you're able to unlock like the what do you call it? The key, right? It's like if you watch The Matrix when Keanu Reeves gets hooked up in the brain and then he learns all these martial arts.
Yeah.
Like you're able to see the language.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to see the nuances
I
that you
started
weren't able
making
to
that
see
connection.
that. Yeah. Where you're just like, oh, I see the pitch is changing here, or I see the rhythm is changing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think because it was kind of thrown on me, it wasn't something that I sought out when I was young. So to me, it just felt like, oh, I have to do this. It's like a chore.
Yeah.
Versus when I did start kind of going into it on my own and finding my own interests within music, within certain bands and certain artists, that's where I was like, okay, now I can connect to it.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like even that all of those bands that you mentioned were Latino, right, or Mexicano, or like Spanish speaking, right? So that's interesting. What kind of music did you play with the band, with your family band?
We were doing a lot of like música versátil, cumbia, norteñas, zapateados, like everything you hear at a party, like at a, Mexican party.
Okay.
Que lo que van a poner para el ambiente, that's what we did. So I would be the main vocalist, but I would also play the keyboard.
Okay.
And my dad would be the guitarist, my brother Mikey would be the bassist, and then my brother Angel the drummer. So in a way, people would always compare us to like, you guys were like Selena y Los Dinos. I'm like, yeah, you guys have no idea. It really is like that.
Yeah. And so what was it like to be like a young person in front of a whole bunch of people? Like, how did you deal with like the crowd, with the angst that you might have or the butterflies that you might have before getting on stage? And then, so what was it like to grapple with that at a young age, where it's like you're being thrown in front of people? Like, we've been practicing. Now let's do it, and there are people staring at you.
It was hard. It was very hard. I did it first through church. I think that's probably what might have helped me personally to get through that of being in front of people. But I remember there were instances where I think I was like 10 or 11 that my dad would basically have me be part of his church group and play these alabanzas. But sometimes I felt a lot of pressure because I would have to learn up to like 15 to 20 songs at age 10 or 11 and perform them in front of people. And I do actually remember there was one instance where I did have a mental breakdown like in front of like a crowd.
Wow. And
my dad just kept playing, and this señora from like the church like just came over to me and took me away from the whole thing.
Wow. And imagine, I mean, you're learning all these songs and you're still having to do your homework. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not even like, you have to memorize these things too, right? So it's like, I mean, I remember like memorizing my songs, and that caused me to stop memorizing other people's songs.
Oh, wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like, once I started writing my own songs and I needed to memorize my songs, like, there's a certain point where it's like, I'll remember the lyrics of like, when they play the hip hop jams and everybody's like,
we all know the lyrics to this. Yeah, we're rapping to it.
Brown skin lady, right? Like you know the lyrics. There's a certain point where I stopped singing because I was learning my own songs, right?
My God.
And so I wasn't concentrating on learning their songs. I had to learn my songs because I was going to perform. So definitely like that could definitely put a lot of pressure on you as a young person where you're having to learn all these songs.
I think that's probably why it felt like a chore to me, because I'm like, I'm being put in to like do this, and I'm expected to do it because it's for my parents, and they're telling me like, hey, we're all a part of this, and you can't let your community down. But it was a lot of pressure. I think that did basically help me to jump that hurdle so early on, that when we did decide to do the family band, like this was by the time I was 22. So that family band didn't come to life. Obviously, my brothers came much later on in life, and as they got older, I got older. It wasn't until I was 22 years old that's when we decided to do the family band, and the reason was to keep my brothers off of the streets.
Okay.
And you know, I was 22. Like, I had just finished getting my associates. I was in that point in my life where I still was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But my parents, you know, put this project, and I was still living at home, and they were like, well, this would be something to get you some extra money on the side. And I think that's really why I went through it. But we did that family band for 6 years. Mm-hmm. And halfway down the line was when the idea of us doing our own band started to come to life, which was the mini projects.
And so your own band, what do you mean by, you're talking about the family band.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah.
And then what is the relationship like with your brothers?
Currently right now, well, we're not really on speaking terms at this moment.
Okay. And so is it due to the band and like that experience, or just personal stuff that's been happening?
It's a little bit of both. When we had the band, our actual band, the mini projects, it came out of that background of like us playing together as a family band to keep them off the streets, to keep them in school, keep them like, you know, busy.
Yeah. But
it was never something I really wanted to do. It was just, again, I was put in that situation.
Yeah, you were being forced to do this because it's for the good of the family.
Exactly. Yeah. Es por la familia. And I love music, and I did realize early on I was good at it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like sometimes I'm like, what if I just did music because I was just good at it and it was just expected of me versus me actually having a desire to do it.
Yeah.
When we decided to do our actual band, which was the mini projects, it was something that like I did start to get excited for, because I'm like, okay, finally this is something that I want to do. This is something that I can write my music and, you know, present it with my brothers, and I was so excited because it would be something that we can do together.
Yeah.
Also counting that we have already played together. So it was like, okay, let's try this out. And we did it, and it did. I was surprised by so many things of what we were able to accomplish when we did do it. Like, we played at Ruido Fest, we played at Pilsen Fest. Like, we were going up there, but behind the scenes, people didn't really see the real dynamic of us as siblings.
Yeah.
There's a huge age gap between us. I'm older than them by 10 years.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's crazy.
So, you know, I always was the one that wanted to do the marketing for the band and like get the connections to like play shows and get our name out there. And eventually it did start to feel like I was the one that was holding most of the responsibility of the band. They were calling
you to organize them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And, you know, unfortunately, close to the end of that journey was where now like my personal life was starting to be more my priority. Like I'm getting older, you know, I want to settle down. I want to like be with, you know, whoever I'm choosing to be with. And as a band and as siblings, we weren't going on the same page anymore of what we wanted as like that project. With music, I would tell them like, I want to actually like, if we're doing all this effort to write music and share it with fans and, you know, do music videos, tiene que haber un propósito, right? Or are we just wasting our time here?
Yeah,
And
there has to be a target. We're trying to hit a target.
yeah, exactly. But some of them weren't on that same page. Some of them just were like, well, I just want to do music, just for fun.
Yeah.
And my goal wasn't that. So
It's interesting though, because you grew into that, right? Like when you were talking about your dad and your dad kind of forcing you to do the piano, and then, yeah, we're going to do this in church. You were like, I guess I'm going to do it. Right. But there was also, I felt like when you were talking about that there was a point where you were like, I just want to be a kid.
yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so your brothers sound like they might have just been on that level where they were just like, yo, I just want to be a kid. And you had grown into what your dad was, in a sense, where you were like, yo, let's get this popping. Let's get this moving. And they were still like on another level.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to maybe tap back into that later when they're like your age and they're like, okay, I can see where this is going, and I can see, because the other thing is, as young people, we don't really see the future because we
You're
haven't.
right.
Right? So we're always like living in the present, and it's like what feels good now,
Yeah.
and not necessarily what feels good then. And so that might have been like maybe a disconnect that you had with some of the brothers in the band.
You're right. You know what? I've actually never thought of that. That's a new thought for me.
It was because we grow, right? We there's a certain point where it's just like, this isn't fun anymore. Right? Not necessarily like I'm not doing it for fun.
Right.
I'm doing it because I want to do something with it. Like I'm there's an aim in what I'm doing. Like I used to be a teacher, and so one of the things that I connect with you on is this idea of you're doing it for the greater good, right? So it's just like there's a point where I was thinking when I was teaching that it was just like that was the only way of life that I was gonna have. Like I'm doing it for the good of the community, right? And so being out of that space now and not teaching anymore puts me in a space where it's like, yo, I can dream whatever I want to dream.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm not just confined in that little square anymore where it's just like, this is what my life was going to be. Now it can be something completely different. And it's so exciting to like really flourish in that and like think outside of that place that I was in.
Now I am in that position where, okay, now I'm free, but now what do I do? Because I everything up to 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, I basically met like who is now like the love of my life, my future husband.
That's what's up.
Yeah. Didn't see that coming, but it just happened. It occurred. And that was basic in that time in my life when we met was where the mini projects were in that transition of like, you know what, we're just going to take a break and figure ourselves out. So I took that moment in my life where I'm like, okay, well, I want to see what I can do as an artist, as a musician by myself, because I haven't tried it. And you know, ironically, the person that I'm going to marry also happens to be a musician himself. And he was like, whatever you want to do, I'm going to support you. Yeah. And that's basically where now like my solo project basically came to life. So I understand like where you were going at about like when you were teaching and when you stopped, you now are like, we're in that position of, okay, now I have this free time. Now what can I do for me? That's basically where I was at. Yeah,
because it was just like teaching and I was also organizing. So it was just like, it was nonstop work and I had children. And once I had children, it was like, I grew up without a dad. Okay. Right? Like I grew up with a single mom. I'm adopted, so I was an only child. And so it was just like, you know, I needed to heal that wound of like not having a dad. So I had kids. And it totally, like we were talking about, I have all my patience got taken away by my kids. I had no patience for anybody else's children, you know, as incredible as they may be, you know, some of them.
But they take a lot.
They take a lot of energy. And I didn't have that energy anymore. And so thinking outside the box and now being able to be present with them and still continue to dream is something that is like the silver lining in everything. Yes. Right? And so You know, when you talk about like stopping the project, I also had that as well, man. Like I had a group. There was a group of us that was called 500 and Growing, 500 Nations.
Oh,
and so the 500 Nations were the 500 indigenous groups that were here before the European ever stepped foot. And so that's why we called it 500 Nations. And we had a member that decided to go to ASU, Arizona State University. So he moved to Arizona, and then and then there were two left of us. And we were having conversations about things, and we didn't really like go see eye to eye in how we were going to progress. When it became down to like the down dirty, like, look, we're going to put all of it into it right now. It was just like, I was ready to do it. And the other member of the group was like, not really on that. You know, had other life things going on.
Different pages.
And so it was like, I had to make that decision as well in the group, where I was just like, you know what, like, I'm going to work on my own thing right now. And my mom had just passed away. And so she passed away in 2006, and I released the only album I've ever released in 2007, called Firstborn. And so it was just like, that album came together incredibly quick. It was wild because, again, I was stuck where it was just like, we're not doing this anymore. Damn, I've been working on these beats and these songs. And although they were like really unfinished, I learned what I needed to learn to be able to do the solo project. And that solo project came out really quickly.
That's amazing.
Have you had that experience as far as like that? Like what was it like to leave the group and finally like sit there with your notepad or with the keyboard or the guitar and be like, damn, what am I going to do now?
It was so hard. I think that was leaving the band, or like basically saying goodbye to the band. Excuse me, because it still makes me a little emotional, but it was like the hardest. It was the hardest thing to like let go, because I grew up basically with the idea that like la familia es todo, ¿verdad? Like family is everything.
Yeah.
And when you like give so much to like something and it involves like your family, it's special. Yeah. At least that's like, it makes you feel special about it. So when that band was basically done, the reason why that like it couldn't continue, obviously one of the reasons was we weren't all on the same page. Number two, it started to feel like that project wasn't like, I wasn't a part of it as much as everybody else in my family was.
Yeah.
It felt more like the mini projects now was something of like my older brother, who graciously, yes, was helping us with our music videos and visual albums. However, a lot of those ideas weren't necessarily mine. It wasn't ours. It was just like thrown on us of like, this is what you guys can be like. And I feel like maybe that's how artists probably feel when they're in labels, where the labels kind of take control of like what their band is, their image, their sound and everything. Yeah. So it was also starting to feel like this project isn't even mine anymore. And then number three, you know, it ties back into like our personal lives. You know, at that time I had met the man that I'm going to marry, and you know, I'm the type where I always love bringing everybody together, and I'm like, okay, I want my family. We have a new band member. Yeah, no, not so much.
Okay. I was not so much. No. He's in the corner, ready to play with his amp.
No, that was the complete opposite. Okay. He just was. Obviously, he wanted to meet my family, and he just wanted to, you know, be involved and help us in any way, support us. But I feel like my family felt threatened instead of accepting him.
Yeah. They were like, oh, he's gonna come and change everything.
I feel like that's what they thought it was. Yeah. And it's the furthest from the truth. He had like, you know, he was motivated to like help record us, to like, you know, help do whatever for the band to grow. Yeah. And when it got to the point where my brothers couldn't even be in the same room with him, I'm like, how can I do this project then? when personally we're just not in sync anymore.
I feel you, man. Yeah.
So it was so hard to walk away from that and to tell him like I can't keep lying to myself and pretend that everything is good. I can't keep lying to the fans or the audience or people where they're seeing us on social media like, oh my God, they're siblings and they play in a band together. But behind closed doors, we would argue before going on.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I can't keep doing this anymore.
Yeah, like if you've ever seen the documentary of Tribe Called Quest, where it's like,
I haven't, but I've heard
you
it.
should, yo. So it's like Q-Tip and Phife are like fighting in the backstage, and they're just like, they're like, yo, we're about to go on stage, and he's not even talking to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like he can't say one word to me, and it's just like, we're about to go on stage, and he's like,
and this is wild, and this is happening.
Yeah. And so it reminds me of that when you mentioned like just the arguments before going up on stage.
Yeah. Yeah. So that transition or that moment in my life 2 years ago, it was the most challenging thing I've ever done. I didn't want to let it go because it was so much hard work. And
you were one of the founders of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like that's your baby that kind of grew into something else, but you still have connections to it, and you're just like, yeah. And the other thing is those dreams that you kind of dreamt of it were like, dead.
Exactly.
In a sense, where it's just like those dreams are not going to be flourished anymore. They're not gonna be created, and I have to move on with that. There's definitely like a mourning process.
Oh yeah, I felt it felt like a death. And then on top of that one of my closest friends had happened to pass away in that time. So that all of this happened in the summer of 2022. So past pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah. So that moment in my life was just shambles. So thankfully I'm now in a place where I think I've done a lot of healing, and I actually, tying to what you had mentioned earlier about like where we're at now or where I'm at now, you had mentioned that you wrote an album after the
passing of my mom.
Yes, after the passing of your mom and how it came by so quick. I just wrapped up an EP now that I plan to release at the end of November.
Ooh, exciting.
Yes. And that whole project is in response of all of my mourning of just what I went through in that time of like the separation of the band, the separation of my family, choosing myself first, accepting to be myself first, because that was so hard. I'm all about like giving everybody else and help everybody else and bring everybody together.
Sound like a teacher.
I wanted to be an English teacher.
Oh man, actually. I don't know if you would. I mean, it would just be another layer of that. Yeah. It's just like you got to help everybody else, and you're kind of like grinding at times. If you're really trying to do it, that's how I was doing it. I felt ground down, but yeah. So, speaking of that, is there anything that you wanted to change? Growing up, is there anything that you would? I know you mentioned the band and you mentioned the relationships that you have with your brothers, but is there, you can mention that, but it can also be like a little version of you, right? That looked up at everybody. Is there anything that you ever wanted to change?
I think more personal. I have thought of that actually. If I could go back, I would try to help my parents see more outside the box of what they only know, because they are both very religious. They run their life based on their religion. They run their life based on Catholicism. And my whole thing is I would hope that my parents would be the type of people to just accept people as they are and to respect and be respect others to be respected back.
Treat others like you would want to be treated. Right?
Yes, but actually live behind that philosophy.
Yeah.
I would have changed if I would be able to talk to my mom and tell her things. I would try to get her to understand like not everybody is going to think just like you, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
As a little girl growing up, I did feel like everybody kind of just spoke for me or just decided for me what would be best for my life. And I
play the piano.
Yes, yes,
right?
yes.
It started with that.
Play the piano. You know, you're gonna now like help us out with like, you know, raising your 2 younger brothers. You know, be the older sister.
Make the sandwiches probably.
Yeah,
Right.
do all of that. Even after college, like, you know, my mom tried to do a business with me and I just kind of went along with it, selling cosmetics. And I realized that basically my whole life I was just always saying yes, yes, mom, yes, mom, yes, mom, yes, mom. Never really having an original thought, or never having a voice, or never speaking up like, hey, mom, like, how about, like, what if I did this instead?
Yeah.
Just speaking up more.
Yeah. And then kind of talking about that, like, are there any moments that you had to stand up for yourself? I mean, obviously, the biggest moment when you had to be like, yo, the band, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. I'm going to have to take care of myself right now, and I'm going to have to do me. But is there any other times that, I mean, you can mention that, but you can also talk about any other times where you had to stand up for yourself?
Probably when I moved out.
Ooh, okay. What was that like?
Probably when I moved out right before I turned 25, and I was so scared. I was so scared of telling them that I want to move up, and I think of that now. I'm like, I'm 25 years old. How do I not have like the confidence or la confianza de decirles like, hey, I want to do my own thing.
Well, I think that when we talk about religion and you talk about Catholicism and you talk about Mexicanidad, right?
Yes.
It's like you don't leave until you're ready to get married.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, typically that's how Mexicano families work.
Yeah. Yeah. That was probably the first time where I did had to stand up for myself. It was not easy telling them.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why would we feel afraid to tell our parents anything? That if it's something for ourselves, like we're growing up, we're becoming adults.
Yeah.
But I think that was the first time. The biggest one, obviously, was the most recent, was choosing myself and choosing what I wanted for my life, because I'm like, I'm not a little girl anymore.
Yeah. And then you also had to go through that growing process as well, right? Because you're discovering yourself for the first time. You're like, oh my God, I just stood up for myself. What did that feel like? Did it feel empowering? I mean, it might have felt bad because you're just like, damn, we're programmed, especially Mexicanos, I think, are programmed to be like, yo, you follow your parents. You don't disrespect them. You make sure that you do whatever they're asking you to do, right? And especially, I mean, for me, I would say old school parents.
Yeah.
Right? But then you got kind of, it's weird. Because you got some of the old schoolness of that through the Catholicism and the cultural practices, but then you had creatives as parents.
Yes.
Which is definitely like another, it's like my mom wasn't creative like that. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? She sent me to Ballet Folklorico. You know what I'm saying?
You did that? I did that too for a few years.
Man, yo. I mean, I have like positive and negative.
Okay, that's fair. That's absolutely fair.
Because I was always the person who got selected to be the guinea pig.
Oh,
because I can dance. I have rhythm, right? And so I like dancing. But I would be like, we would all be in a group, and then the teacher would be like, okay, well, so we're gonna do this. Okay, Jesus, can you come over here and we're gonna do this together?
Oh my
Lord!
I'd be
like, oh my God, I have to make the mistakes in front of everybody, right? So it's just like you're put on the spot. But I'm also thankful that my mom put me in that place, because now I'm able to be in front of people and be comfortable, like making mistakes too.
Yeah.
And just being
we're not
like,
afraid anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still afraid. When I get called to box, there's still like a part that's afraid, right? But I know what to do. I know that it's going to go away.
Yeah.
I know the process of things. And so, you know, I think that, you know, standing up for yourself and moving out had to have been like an incredible learning process. I mean, there have been stories of like children that get scholarships to like Ivy League schools or just scholarships in general to some other place, right? Like very far away from Chicago. And you have parents that are just like,
they're scared. They don't want us to leave the house. Yeah.
You're not going. Like, you got to stay around here. Like, what are your brothers going to do? Like, what? And they're always like trying to get you. And so there were conversations that you had to have as educators or as teachers with the parents and be like, yo, you understand that they got a full scholarship? Like, yo, you got to let them go. You know, or Harvard or Yale or Stanford, like, let them go, man. Like, they have to experience. Pero la familia necesitamos estar juntos. We need to be together. It's the family. And it's just like, yo, let's think outside of the box.
I struggled with that. Tying with what you said earlier about lo que es la cultura de nosotros. La familia siempre es unida, especialmente si eres la hija. Especially if you're like the daughter. Yeah. They just right away expect like, you're going to do whatever we say. So it's like, that I struggled with the fact that I'm like, they're telling me this, but yet they were allowing me to flourish as a creative. Yeah. So
yeah, it's like a double edged sword.
Exactly. So when I had chosen myself, it was reflecting back on all of that. I kept thinking, am I doing the right thing or am I doing the wrong thing? Like, am I doing something bad? Is this going to be okay? Because I've never done it before. But thankfully, it's been 2 years now. You know, unfortunately, I had to put those boundaries for myself with my family. I love my family for what they have given me. They have given me the confidence to be able to pursue music, even though it's so scary. They gave me the confidence to just go for it. They gave me the confidence to be able to stand in front of people and perform or talk or give a speech. My mom did pass on the ability to connect with people. But I know that their values and my values never really were truly aligned. And these last 2 years have made me really self-reflect of what am I going to take from my family with me now that I'm on this new chapter in my life where I'm in that self-discovery, but who am I now?
Yeah. So, and what have you taken from your family?
That whatever you do in life, do it well.
Yeah.
Don't go halfway.
Okay. And then did you stay connected to the Catholic religion?
Not so much. Growing up, I never felt like I was really connected with it. I did always think that you should treat people how you want to be treated. So I always have tried to strive with that of like, I'm going to treat someone how I would love to be treated. So I always treat people with respect. I always actively try to listen and try to connect, especially when it's in an environment full of adversity, because I feel like we can grow as people when we are, you know, involved in challenges. Yeah. I didn't connect too much with that religion. I still really don't. I do believe that there is something, I don't know what it is, but I believe enough that I would always want to treat everybody with love and respect, because that's what I would love to receive in return. Yeah.
And the reason why I ask is because you said that they were like ultra Catholic. You know what I'm saying? And they were in the youth, they met in the youth group. Yes. So they were like in it. You know, for me, it was just like, just learning about how we learned really impacted, where I was just like, yo, there's something about this that isn't not vibing with me right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
Like, plus, just knowing the real history behind it, that's what doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah, I had that. That's wild, man, because I went to a religious retreat. I went to I went to Catholic grammar school and a Catholic high school. Okay. Right? And so we had this thing called Kairos.
I went to that too.
Did you? Where did you go?
I went to St. Edward High School, which is in Elgin.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I went to St. Rita. And so we had Kairos. And it's like junior year, you take a week, you go and you I don't remember exactly what we did, but it's wild because that's the moment I was like, yo, I'm not connecting with this at all. And so I made that decision, but it was so impactful that I actually was a leader of Kairos for the next year.
Oh, wow.
Because I was so impacted. even though it made me realize that I wasn't vibing with it, I was like, that time was so special for me to like really come to terms with what I believe, that it was just like, wow, you know, like it was such a beautiful experience. I want to be able to create that for other people, even if they're authentically going to be like super Catholic after they leave. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like whatever you learn in this space is I wanted to help create that, you know, and not necessarily push anybody anywhere, any direction, but like facilitate that growth.
Okay,
And
I see what you mean.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I don't have anything against anybody and what they believe. You
Me
know what I'm saying?
neither.
Like if you want to believe it, word. But once I started learning about the Inquisition, once I started learning about the conquest, once I started learning about colonialism, and I was like, yo, I'm not feeling this right now. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't stand by this right now.
Me neither. That's exactly the way that I feel, and that's why I can't really connect with that. And it was something that I was vocal about to my parents the last few times that I was around them. And I told them, whatever you guys believe in, like, go be that. And no one should make you feel anything other than that. However, respect me and what I don't believe in. I don't believe in that. I don't relate to that. I don't live my life that way. I only live my life as be respectful and respect others, and that is it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was just recently talking about was you know, grandma. Grandma was like as simple as like she was a beautiful person. She passed away not too long ago, and man, I learned so much from her. But when we had children, she bought my daughter, my oldest daughter, earrings.
Aww.
And that was beautiful, right? And she was like, let me see her with her earrings. And I was like, abuelita, grandma, I'm not going to be able to put the earrings on because we didn't pierce her ears.
Oh no.
And she's like, what do you mean you didn't pierce her ears? Like, yeah, we didn't pierce her ears. She's like, yo, like, you pierce her ears when they're born. Like,
I know, we all
she's
get
a
them
girl.
done.
She's a girl, man. Like, what's going on? And I was just like, yo, we do not want to alter her body without her knowing, right?
Oh,
like,
okay.
she needs to make that decision. If she wants earrings, she's going to get them. But it needs to be her decision. And so it was just kind of like those cultural practices that were like, that tie back into the frame of mind where it's just like, yo, this is just what we do. And then it's like I became the Americano, right? With Americano thoughts, you know. And then it was just like it was interesting to see grandma react and be like, yo,
and
what do you mean?
That, yeah.
Like, what do you mean, man? Like, we don't do that. But it's part of the growing process, right? Like once you become self-aware and you're not just following people to follow them, and you're actually like, do I feel this? Do I represent this? Like, is this really me? And then you find out it's not really you, or you become conscious of things. And so those cultural practices are interesting. What's your favorite genre of music and why? Like, what do you rock out to where you're just like, damn, this is my jam. Like, I know everything about this type of music.
That's such a hard question.
Or it could be several, you know, like what
okay.
If you had your phone, right, and you were streaming music, you say you're trying to stop and like not stream so much, but like you have access to every album ever. Like what's in that playlist?
Okay. I can answer it now. So the main genre, I think overall, rock. However, in rock, there's like so many subgenres under one genre.
Yeah.
So I definitely would say rock dominates it because it's what I grew up with. My parents were always playing, you know, Caifanes, Enanitos Verdes, Maná, Hombres G, Duncan Du. But then they would also show me like English rock and like classic rock.
How old are they?
My dad is 51.
Okay.
51. And my mom's 47.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a little younger than they are. So it's just like I can see and they're from. Were they raised here in the United States?
No.
Okay, they were raised in Mexico, so they were listening to the Caifanes in Mexico.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they're.
My dad came here in '85,
Okay.
so he had. I think he was here basically like right in the middle of all of that, like when Soda Stereo came out, Michael Jackson.
So he was like 10 years old.
Yeah. No, he wasn't. He was 17 when he came over here.
Okay, 17.
Yeah. So he was a teenager.
Oh, wow. So he really
Yeah.
got a whole bunch of that doses over there.
Yeah. And then my mom would listen to Michael Jackson, Madonna, Magneto, in the 90s, Cava, like Faye, all of like the rock pop genre. So
he was more hardcore and she was rock pop.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, just like that. And I think that's why like the music that I mostly listen to, yes, it was influenced by what they loved.
Yeah.
I love all things rock. I love indie rock. I love pop rock.
Yeah.
I love 80s pop rock. Synth pop. It's
what's 80s pop rock?
80s pop rock, like think like Flock of Seagulls. Who else? Oh my God, I'm trying to think. Flock of Seagulls. Mostly Michael Jackson. I just mostly listen to Michael Jackson. Actually, here I have a whole playlist.
Yeah.
Of that.
Have you ever thought about making it into a mix like a DJ?
You know what? People have told me that in the past, that why don't I become a DJ? Because anytime I put music in public spaces, they're always like, wait, who has the aux right now? And they would always be like, oh, Emi has the aux. So I'd always pick the good ones. The Cure, Stevie Nicks, Bronski Beat, who else? Janet Jackson, Naked Eyes, Billy Idol, Tears for Fears, Depeche Mode.
Nice.
So, yes.
You got that new wave in there.
Yeah. A lot of the new wave and synth pop.
Okay. Have you ever thought about stopping? I
Yes.
mean, I know that you thought about stopping the group, right? But like, have you ever thought about stopping in general and just like not doing music?
Yeah, last year.
What was that like?
It was I really did contemplate stopping music altogether. But I think a lot of it had to do with the reason that I was grieving still.
Yeah.
Because I was so attached with music and my family.
Yeah.
I felt like I needed the separation completely from both to be able to properly mourn it. So I feel like that was the reason why I wanted to quit, because I anytime I started to pick up the guitar or I started to write music or I started to work on something, it still brought me back to everything that had to do with my family.
Yeah, it was just like deja vu, or like just summoning that feeling.
Yes, a lot of familiar feelings. It was always just being tied with my family. So I did stop. I stopped completely last year.
What did that feel like?
It was hard.
Yeah.
All
Were
of it
you
was a
listening to music
challenge.
and like lip singing or like even singing along with it? And you're like, oh my God. Oh, I'm sad now.
I know. I think I was trying to learn to be okay with music as just a music listener instead of as a musician.
Yeah.
So I was trying to connect with music again by just disconnecting as a musician, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. Right? Like you're becoming, so it's like when I was not memorizing the lyrics of like the new songs that had come out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like sure, I was working on my own music, but I was also robbing myself a little bit of like that. So now we go to like a hip hop concert, and the DJ is spinning, and it's like, you know what I'm saying? It'll be like Stasis High comes on. I know all the song, I know all the words, but then like a Kanye song comes on, or like what's something popping? Like I don't know, like a Dr. Dre song, and I don't know any of the words, yo. So I'm like, yeah, and I'm going along with it, and then all of a sudden I just shut down. And if you ever see me at a hip hop concert and you see me just shut down, those are the years that I was trying to memorize my own songs. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's different to like be a fan and to like really appreciate what people are creating. But did that create like a little jealousy where you're just like, man, like, or just like a passion to get back into it?
I think it was more, it did help me to have a passion to get back in, because last year when I made that conscious decision to stop, coincidentally in that time I was starting to get hired a lot around the Chicagoland area to work at music festivals, because I was doing a lot of brand ambassador, work on the side. So I just kind of just thrusted myself in that area of like being more backstage at music festivals. Yeah. So it helped me to separate myself, but at the same time I still felt like I was connected to it, but now just seeing it from a different perspective. So being around music festivals, being around artists in that way, like seeing what other artists were doing, interacting in those spaces of fans of these artists.
Yeah. How was that? What was that like?
I loved it, actually. I never thought I would be on that side of just seeing how these events,
like producing.
Yes. Yeah. So it made me like appreciate that. So I was involved. I worked at Riot Fest. I worked at Lollapalooza. I worked at Taste of Chicago. I worked at Pitchfork. So I was blessed to see a huge variety of different types of music festivals, of different types of genres. I worked Sueños. That to me was very, very different, because it was a whole Latino community, but I'm more used to like the rock Latino community. So it's being around
the reggaeton
y los narcocorridos, like it was, how do I say it, just different.
What is it like to sing solo, as far as different from being part of the group with your family?
It's exciting now.
Yeah.
Because
I imagine it has to be liberating, because when you have other people that you need to account for, and people need to count on you, and like you're kind of bound to each other. Yes. Right. As a solo artist, you get to be like, yo, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do this. I don't have to wait for anybody. I don't have to wait for the drummer. You do, but they're on your time. Yeah. You're bringing them in. They're not just like your brother that came in late, right?
Exactly.
So what is it like? What's the difference?
The difference is that I choose what I want to do with it. It's exciting, and it was scary at first, of course, because now you're the one that's doing everything on your own, and you're learning how to record. You're learning how to now market as a solo artist versus as a band. I feel like as a band, at least here in Chicago, I'll just speak from my experience. Yeah. Now that I've done both, I've done the band and I've done the solo project. As a band, I had noticed that like Chicago was right away more accepting of it, because we just have such a huge music scene of just DIY bands, and we all support each other. We're all on bills and everything, and like, hey, let's put a show together. Versus as a solo artist, I still think it's that, at least for Latinos, from what I've seen, I feel like solo artists is still like a small community that's growing. I have been seeing more solo artists come out, which is amazing. Yeah. But as marketing wise, as a band, it just felt like it definitely was a little bit easier, because you have that support and you have that image that it's a band.
Yeah, like it's like there's that wow factor.
Exactly.
Like, oh shit, they're coming for real.
Yeah.
And as a solo artist, it's like you have to
prove yourself more.
For sure. Because it's like it's just you. Or you can have a band, but they're focusing on you instead of the group.
So you have to come out twice. Like you have to bring it double time. You have to, at least that's how I treat it. I push myself to see, okay, what else can I do with this solo project? I've done rock, I've done synthpop, I've done house. That's the fun side, is I can do whatever I want with my music. And now with this new song that I just released, it was a cumbia song, Llevame Contigo. It's been exciting to see how people have really gravitated towards that song. I don't know if it's because it's in Spanish or because it's a cumbia, but
it's probably both.
It's probably both.
Yo, I mean, so we went to the Selena tribute at Millennium Park, and I took my daughters. Yo, every time we get into the car, my youngest daughter is like, I'll be playing some house or some hip hop, and she'll be like, Papi, can you put Selena in? So I put it on, and then she'll even make me turn it up. Yo, she'll be like, hey, can you turn it up, man? It's not loud enough, bro. Like, come on, man. We riding right now. It's just like, it's wild. So now I have two of the biggest Selena fans ever, yo.
That's so cute.
We were like, yo, we explained the story. Like, yo, she was murdered, blah, blah, this. It was really sad.
How do they take that? Because it's like, we grew up with that, but how does the young generation that wasn't alive, like, how do they?
Well, they know from their grandma, right? So those conversations of people dying came with grandma when we went to go visit grandma at the cemetery. And that's like a real weird situation, man. Because it's just like, you know, you're going to have that conversation. So it's like, why are we going to why are we going to the cemetery? Why are we sitting here? It's just like, yo, we're sitting here because of your grandma, and she would have loved to see you alive. And it's just like, we were coming back home. Am I going to die?
Oh,
yeah.
no.
Yeah, you are gonna. No, I don't sugarcoat anything, right? So I'm like, yes, you are gonna die. You know, are you gonna die? Yeah, I am gonna die. What if you die before or what if you die tomorrow? I'm like, well, I hope you just know that I love you, and you know your mom will take care of you. But what if you both? Like, it's just like those questions.
That is so wild, yeah.
So it's just like, but it also gives you an opportunity to be able to, like, tell her,
humanize it. And
well, what I tell her is like, and what I believe is like, yo, I wouldn't want to live forever. And the reason why I wouldn't want to live forever is because if you live forever, you don't appreciate what you have, right? Like this time that I have with my daughters, like this idea of me healing myself and just in general, the family, by being a family person, by being a family man and being a dad and being present, being a father, is like, I'm enjoying this, you know what I'm saying? I'm enjoying this time and like being present with them. And so when you get caught up and you're just like other places, you don't really appreciate things. And death is one of those things that brings you in focus and being like, yo, appreciate what you have.
Yeah.
So I'm like, appreciate me while I'm here. We're having this conversation. Stop being other places.
Be present.
Be present. And so that's, the death of my mom definitely got me into that place of being present. And then coming back to that teaching thing and like organizing and being part of a movement, it's just like, I wanted to be present, and it wasn't possible to be present. For me, I didn't at least see it. It wasn't possible to be present and like be fully engaged in other things. And so there was a certain point where I had to like choose myself, like you chose yourself, where it was just like, yo, I'm gonna focus on me. You know, like I've given a lot of energy to this, and, you know, other people need to give energy, you know, and I'm going to support other people who give energy. But it's like organizing, and I think teaching in general, for me, I see it as a young person's game. When I had the patience to deal with kids, when I had the time to go to all the meetings, you know, I don't have that anymore because I prioritize my family.
And it's also like your passion and your drive. If you, I would imagine if you didn't have your family that you have now, like then, your headspace would be completely all in.
Yeah. But then the other thing is, and it kind of connects with your story, when you talk about like the family and how your family was like the igniting thing for you to do things. It was just like, for me, it was like my art was consumed by organizing in the movement. So it was like, yo, we need a flyer. We need this. We need that. We need this. Yo, you're an artist. Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? Right? And so it's dope. I'm working with people and they know that they can trust me and we'll work on things, but I'm not doing my own thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm not creating for myself. I'm not creating, you know, like that type of painting, right? Like, or the drawing that you see there of my daughters, right? It's like, I want to be able to do that. And so, you know, I definitely understand what it's like to go solo. So is there anything else that you would say that like if a person is in a band and they're going to transfer into going solo for whatever reason, what's some of the advice or some of the learning curves that you would give people in that transition?
find yourself, find the reason why you're doing this, and keep that reason alive as you're going in that process, because you're going to find yourself be challenged in ways you didn't get challenged before when you were in a group. You don't have, no one else to, check in with or consult with or get advice from. You're basically the one that's taking that decision about everything that you do with your solo project. So I would definitely advise, find your why and find yourself of why you're doing it. Keep it strongly to yourself. When I chose to come back into it, when I did see that I wanted to come back to music, I said to myself, I want to do this because at the end of the day, I can't let it go. I can't let go of music, whether it's to do it for me or to do it in front of a crowd. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm going to do it for me. And so I went into that where I'm like, I'm going to start releasing music again this year. And I was like, I want to do it because I love it. I want to do it because I love it. And to just do it, just do it. Ignore the noise out there. Ignore the noise in your head even. You're going to doubt yourself. Like, can I do this? Is this going to be great? Just do it.
Okay.
Just do it.
And then what about, like, we've been a little hard on your fam. You know what I'm saying? Like, why don't we give them flowers? I think that flowers are needed, because you wouldn't even be in the place of like, yo, do the music on my own without your family like pushing you to be to push you to a certain place for you to want to grow into that. Like, what would you want to tell your family about the influence and the direction that they put you in, where it's like now you're able to discover yourself?
I would tell my family that I'm going to carry on the legacy that we have as like in my family with music, because both of my parents, they love music. That's a given. They love music, they love dance, they love art, and no one will ever take that away of what they've instilled about that in me. So I would tell them, like, your love for music is the reason who I am today.
That's what's up.
And that's thanks to them.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then what was the pandemic like in the music scene? Like, what did it hit you like as far as like your creative process?
Oh, that was fun. That was interesting, because when we released our album for the mini projects the day that everything shut down here in Chicago.
What? Dun, 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 dun. It was like the
yeah. So March 13, 2020 was when everything shut down here, and that was the day that our album came out.
Yo, how did your family react, yo? Like, you imagine you're like, you put all this effort into it, and you know, like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, right? But there's like is it gonna be a dud? You know, like,
no,
are we going to be able to perform this? Like, what's going on? So, what was it like to be in that space?
We shifted our attention to online. We had to basically, okay, we spent months on working on this album and recording it. We have to do something with it. So we would just be active online. Like, we would put live shows. We would try to, do different like giveaways to have people like be involved in polls online. When Ruido Fest had opened up their, I guess like their callbacks, or I don't know how you call it, where they were looking for local talent. I remember that I made a post on Instagram just telling people to go and mention our name to Ruido Fest to get us to play for them. And thanks to that was the reason that we were discovered by Ruido Fest. So I had to shift my ideas of like, okay, what can we do then? And everything was just steered online. Just get involved online with our fans so that they don't forget.
For sure, because like you've been probably releasing singles and like teasing the audience.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You're just like, yo, this is the big day we're gonna release, and then all of a sudden, like the what do you call it? That news comes out and it's totally kills everything that you're talking about, because everybody's focused on this crazy thing that's happening in the world, right?
Yeah. Thankfully, we had advantages that we were releasing music videos during the pandemic. Like right before everything had shut down, we were already shooting a music video, and we had just wrapped up like the week before. And so we did release 2 music videos during 2020. I feel like that was what also helped us to, stay connected with our fans. When things started lifting back up, we had also done we threw a backyard show.
Okay.
So it was outside.
Yeah, like David Chappelle.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We made sure everybody had masks on, we had hand sanitizers, and we tried to be as safe as possible, but at least it was, back in the backyard. It was outside. So we did do that. And it was just, we had to think of ways of like, how do we stay connected without losing people?
I mean, that's the same thing that our past guest, Carrie Ann had to do, where it was just like, she has a music studio, and not a music studio, music studio, and then also has like a dance studio.
Oh, okay.
And she was just like, oh snap. And she started seeing like the membership diminish, and people weren't keeping their membership, and it was just like, what do we do? And Carrie Ann decided to start online, and then went online before public schools went online, right? Like that forefront. So it's just like, as creatives, you gotta really make it. So when we
have
were
to
teaching,
adjust
we had
to
like,
what's going on.
Yeah, we were like 2 weeks where we were just like not doing anything, and then went online. So you went to Mexico, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, why did you go to Mexico, and how did it what was it like?
I went to Mexico because I knew I needed some kind of a change. I was obviously still processing everything that had happened with my family and the band, and I needed to find some self-healing. Mexico, both sides of my family, they're all in Mexico. We don't really have family here. And I've been
so you
going.
got all the uncles and aunts and everybody.
All my cousins.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Right?
And I've been going to Mexico since I was 3. So I always say like, soy de los dos lados, because I can just hop on a plane to Mexico and go to my grandma's house, and I look at it as I'm just going to my grandma's house. I know how to move myself on the buses and everything. Like I live like a local over there. Yeah. But I had not been in Mexico for a longer period of time since I was 15. I was used to always going every summer and being there for the whole summer. I even took dance classes when I was a teenager in Mexico. Yeah. And I told myself, I'm like, maybe you need to go back to your other home to re-find yourself and refine like what is it that you want to do. Yeah. I felt lost last year. I did feel lost. Like I was grateful for everything that I was being exposed to with my work, but I still felt like, what am I really going to do with this music? Am I really going to let it go, or can I find a way to come back to it? So I went to Mexico for 3 months. I went last year in November. I stayed in León for a month, and then I stayed in Mexico City for a month and a half, and then I came back to León. And the music scene over there was what really just inspired me. Mm-hmm. I saw bands just playing outside, both in León and in Mexico City. A lot of them were, cover bands, of course, but it was just the energy of how these musicians are they probably don't have more than us. I don't know. I don't want to assume, but just seeing their drive, their passion, seeing them come to life with playing music, and seeing how the audience is, how like nuestra gente, like they just love it. They love it and they feel it and they get lost in that moment. And I feel like that was what like made me like come back to life of like, hey, you got to remember like you're still alive.
Yeah, and you're still a musician, right? Yeah, I feel you, man. Like I've seen the ska being played in el metro.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
it's just
yeah.
like everybody's like dancing in a circle and stuff like that.
Yeah, people, I feel over there always try to remind themselves to like vivir el día y disfrutar la vida. And I feel like sometimes here in the United States, we become so routine, like you had mentioned, like sometimes we just settle in the 9 to 5 mentality and we forget that we're alive in that sense. Mm-hmm. We're just going on autopilot. And Mexico kind of helped me to remind myself, don't always be on autopilot. You got a life to live. Like you have things to give. You have creativity still. Like you have ideas. Don't let those ideas go to waste, or don't just, leave them in the dark.
Yeah. And I imagine that like there's a lot of collaboration that happened during that time in Mexico where you're like, yo, like connecting with different musicians and stuff like that. What were some of those experiences like where you would just like give some props to people in Mexico that are doing some cool stuff?
So I have a friend in León. His name is Eric. Saludos. He is the one that has connected me more to the León music scene. He has a few bands that he works with. So I got exposed to this synthpop band in Mexico, in León, where they're singing in English.
Oh snap! Yeah. So you were just like, yo, let me get on that track.
Yeah, so it was cool to like hear them live. The audience.
Wait, so they're from Mexico and they're singing in English?
Yeah.
And oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of bands in Mexico are kind of steering in that direction, kind of like The Warning, like where they're now just writing in English and releasing music. Okay. So that was interesting for me to see that.
Yeah.
Seeing how the audiences and like the crowds at those shows, I would say the difference between the audiences from there versus the audiences from Chicago. Chicago people, they get into it and they're vibing. People in León, I feel like they just live the words. It's so hard to explain, but I feel like they just really, really love live music. And it was just inspiring to see that. Mexico City, I saw a lot of bands outside just playing on the street as you're walking. Basically like on what you consider the Magnificent Mile here in Chicago. The Magnificent Mile in Mexico was full of bands. Yeah. So you're just walking down that Magnificent Mile and you're hearing
Which street is bands.
That? It's Calle Madero.
Okay.
It goes straight to the Zocalo. I think that's what in Mexico City. Uh-huh. So it's along that strip.
Okay.
So if you're going to Mexico City, go to La Calle Madero because you're going to see a lot of bands there. So I saw ska bands. I saw 80s cover bands. Yeah. I heard cumbia bands. Nice. And that's where I saw like the sonidero community and all the dancers. And I thought that was impressive, seeing how they dance.
That's what's up, man. What's your creative process like? Because you were talking about how you stopped writing and you were like being on some normal stuff, and then you were like, no, I'm not feeling this normal life. Although it's like, it's cool being a fan, but like I want to get back into it, right? Like how do you get your writing process going, or just singing and recording, or like what's that creative process like?
I normally would smoke first, but then I would put on music that I am really vibing with.
Yeah.
From there, then I get in front of the studio with my producer and I tell him like, hey, I'm kind of feeling this sound right now and I want to write something with this. So I'll show him like references of like music that I'm listening to. And I explain to him like, I kind of want it in this tone, but I want it in this rhythm. If I want it like more upbeat or more low key. And then we kind of just build from there. He's been teaching me how to produce as well. So it's been fun now being on that side of recording music. It's the first time that I'm now dabbling with producing.
And engineering, you're saying?
And engineering, yeah. Okay. Which is a whole other ballgame.
Yeah, man, that's a beast.
But I think that tackling that has been what's been pushing me to write more.
Do you write your own songs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when do you write your songs?
Are
you like in the studio writing them, or do you write them on a train, or like what's that writing process like?
Always in the studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just put the monitors on and you blast them, and you're just like, yo, let me get in this vibe.
Yes. I usually start mostly with the beat, because I always hear the beat of, I hear the drums like this, or I hear the drums that way, and from there the melodies start to form. I will always start with piano. Like these are the notes that I'm feeling out, and then after that I just start writing the lyrics, because then the melodies start coming to my head.
That's what's up, man. How do you balance your life of being a musician and your personal life, or is it just like all together?
No, I have to have a schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you balance it?
So, at this moment in my life, it kind of works out that my normal 9 to 5 is on the weekends. So I on weekends, I don't do anything with music at all, because I feel like your 9 to 5 already takes a lot of your mental state. So on weekends, I don't want to do anything. But on my days off, which is always during the week, that's usually when I pick out, all right, this day is when I'm going to work on music, or these 2 days is when I'm going to work on music. So I always have to put it on a calendar, because my personality is, if I don't write it down, I will not do it.
Okay.
So I have to be strict of, I will do this because I need to do this.
So your phone will remind you better get your ass in the studio.
My phone and my physical calendar.
Yeah. Okay, that's what's up. What kind of calendar do you have?
It's a huge paper calendar. So
it's just like a normal regular. It doesn't have like puppies or anything on it.
No,
you don't got like Frida out there.
No,
or like the supermercado ones.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen those ones. No, it's those big white calendars that you write everything on each day.
Oh wow, so you're like super organized.
Oh yeah, I've had to learn to be organized.
Why you were unorganized before?
Oh, very unorganized. I'm like, how do they call those personalities? Where you're more emotionally driven. So I tend to always do everything. If I'm excited, okay, I want to do things now. And then when I'm not excited, I don't do them. So I had to learn, you can't do everything based off of emotion, because then you're just going to have chaos all the time. So that's why I had to learn to buy myself a big calendar, different color pencils, different color markers. I write down when work is work. Yeah. I write down when I go to the gym. I write down when I want to go maybe do a side hustle, either go Uber or go work a brand ambassador gig. And then I write when I'm going to actually lock myself in the studio. Yeah. That's the way that I got to balance it. Otherwise, I'm all over the place.
And when you were a student, were you a good student?
For the most part.
Okay, were you doing that as a student is my question. Did you have that notebook with different pencils and pens and like organizing your day? Did that just transfer onto your personal life?
Kind of, and that's where I credit my mom on that. She taught me how to be organized, because she color codes her schedule as well. Okay. So I took that from my mom. Okay. And because she knew me. She's like, mija, you're all over the place. If you don't write it down, ¿cuándo lo vas a hacer?
And what hardships has helped you guide your music?
What hardships?
Yeah, like trying times. Have you used that to like create music? Have you? Yeah. Like what has that been like? Like you talked about the morning process of like being outside of the group and like forming this like ode to the new you, right? Like what has that process been like?
I think that writing about what I'm feeling and writing everything that I wanted to say is what has helped me to express myself. Anytime that I've gone through a hardship, I feel like I tend to write more when I go through stuff, because since I never was an outspoken person, as I've explained, like growing up, I always just was yes mom or yes ma'am, yes sir. Yeah, I just went with it, and I would never speak up or speak out, keep everything to myself. And music has helped me to to open up and to speak up and to share what I really feel. And soon to realize that I'm not the only one that's feeling those same feelings. Other people now, when they hear my music, they have, reached out and said, like, this song really like touched on me because I was going through something similar to what you were going through. Yeah,
for sure. Do you have like unreleased music that you have that you've held on to, or you just like you create and then just create, distribute? Like what's that process like?
Oh no, I definitely have music in the vault that I haven't finished. My latest song, Llevame Contigo, was actually in the vault for 2 years. So it was halfway done and I was never able to finish it because I was stuck. I got stuck. And sometimes those songs will stay in the vault for months, sometimes years. And I guess it just depends on what I experience in that time that makes me want to go back to a certain song.
Yeah.
The first song that the mini projects released, called Into Thin Air, was a song that I had in a notebook since I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
So seeing the light of day like 20 years later, I think.
Yeah, because when I was talking to Mondo's a past guest that we've had on the podcast, and actually a connection that we have.
Yeah.
Right. Mondo was saying like, because I have music that I have unreleased. 500 Nations is one of those projects that like I have a whole bunch of verses and beats that I've just never released because he had to kill that project, right? And so it was just like, he was like, yo, bro, you should release that. He was like, yo, I'm about like making music and you got to release it. But it's just like, there's a fine balance between that, right? Because you're releasing stuff that might not necessarily be like
correct
quality
for that time,
and correct for that time, right? So
I
like
agree.
if I release it right now, I think that probably like 3 tracks out of the 13 that we made would be something that would be relevant right now. You know what I'm saying? Or something that I would be like, yo, this is dope. You know what I'm saying? So how do you figure out when you're gonna release something, especially if you've been holding it back for so long?
I think I base it off of what does this song make me feel and what does it remind me. So there's a song that we just finished recording that will be released part of the EP for next month in November. But that song, I had it since last summer, but it's more of like a darker sound. So I'm like, this doesn't sound like it would sound right for the summertime. Like, I feel like people won't really connect to it. And because
they want like happy joy.
Yeah,
like
they want tropical. They want like good vibes. So I'm like, this is not for the summertime. And it was one of those songs that half started and I couldn't finish it.
Yeah.
So now that it's been, now that we're in fall and we're getting darker hours and now it's getting a little bit colder, I'm starting to be more in the studio. Now I'm like, okay, this song now can come out because I feel like it's definitely more for the fall and it's got like a spookier sound to it. Okay. So I base my songs basically off of the feeling that it gives me.
Yeah. And then as a kid, if there was a little kid, right, that was like, yo, I want to be a musician, or just like, what would you tell that kid? Or you know what, before you answer that, what would you tell yourself as a little kid? If you could go back and like get into a time machine and be like, yo, I know I got pink hair right now. This is going to be your hair when you grow up. But I might be freaking you out right now because you go along with everybody, right? But what would you tell that little version of you?
I would tell myself, let's see. Oh man, that's such a good question. I would tell myself, learn to find your voice soon and do it fast. You're going to grow up and eventually you have to think for yourself. Everybody is not always going to do the same energy as what you do to everybody else. And just keep that in mind. Still give and still be, you still offer and provide and assist and help, but don't forget to always put yourself first and speak up.
Where was that fork in the road where you were just like, you know, I think you talked about it a little, where you were like, you were doing the 9 to 5 and you were just like, yo, screw it. But like, what was that decision like?
I think that I saw that I couldn't fit in to just the 9 to 5.
Yeah.
That I looked internally and thought, am I really fully going to be okay living this kind of lifestyle, or living with this mindset of just punch in, go to work, punch out, go home? Like, can you see yourself really having that routine type of life? And I said no. I've come now to accept that I am a modern day hippie that just wants to be present, make moments count. And if I'm not going to have any kids, or, you know, I'm not going to be, you know, the typical like wife and mom and, you know, give to my family, then what are you going to do for yourself? So I said, like, well, if I'm going to do it, I might as well do it now that I'm still full body and able. I'm still relatively young. I still have energy, and I'm not tied currently to anything here, thankfully. Sure. I don't have any car payments. I don't have any mortgage. I'm like, if I'm going to do it, maybe now is the time.
For sure. I mean, right now you don't have children, right? Like those types of things tie you down in a good way, but also in like you're not as mobile as you were before, right? Like if you want to get a ticket,
and you got to think of like now you do have to think for them. You do got to think for them because they come first.
What would you tell a musician that was like starting out in music, right? Like you kind of had that conversation with yourself as a young person, but like just a person that doesn't know the ins and outs of like music production, distribution, or anything like that. Like what would you advise them with to focus on?
I would advise them to do their research, whether on Reddit or on YouTube, of what area in music are you trying to focus on? Are you trying to focus more on like engineering? Are you trying to focus more as a songwriter / composer? Are you wanting to collaborate with other individuals and form a group or form a band? Are you trying to do more of the music business side of it, where you're managing artists and you're assisting with booking? So I would, you know, ask a kid, like, what is it about the music itself that you want to focus on? And then from there, advise them to do their research to see like what are they able to do themselves as DIY, or if there's classes that maybe it would benefit them to keep growing as a, you know, artist or whatever leg that they're entering in capacity from. Yeah. So I would tell them, do your research and try to connect with other creatives as well, because you can also learn so much when you're in the room with those people.
Yeah. And how do you book? Like, what's your process like? Like, what's the back end that you're talking about? Like, how do you do that back end? What's your strategy?
When you're in your city, just try to find try to find Facebook groups of other bands or other musicians and other artists. Try to assist shows and go to the different venues, connect with who are the bookers, introduce yourself, let yourself be known, share your project or share your music. If you don't have any music, just be present. That would be one thing. Number 2, TikTok. We're right now in the TikTok and YouTube short reels. A lot of reels. Just put things out there. What else would I say? I would say mostly just in person, going physically into those venues and speaking with the bookers and speaking with other bands that are looking for local talent, and just expose yourself online and TikTok and Instagram of what you are currently working on. And
then how would you price yourself if you talk to the booker, right? And the booker, like, how do you present yourself to a person who is booking at the space?
I always ask with the time, like what is the set time that they're needing for an act, and number 2, like how do they distribute their sales? Is it all like is there a percentage, or like, is it half and half? And then number 3, I always tell them 2 different prices, because it's always, okay, well, if you want the whole band, it's this, but if you prefer just me and like my guitarist and backtracks, then it's, this much. Mm-hmm. So I like to give them options to see what they can work with.
And then how do you present your music to them? You just send them?
I send them. Yeah. I email them.
Or link things up to like Apple or something? Yeah.
I usually email. If it's not in person, I'll always, contact them through email, and I send them my press kit, my music links, and, give them a backstory of like who I am and what I'm trying to do. And if it's in person, same thing, just, in person.
Yeah, you're like, I'm going to pass it to you on your phone. Yeah. But this is me.
Yeah. Okay.
And then what have been some of the most successful shows that you've done where you were just like, damn, that show was perfect?
Well, as with the band, I would say it was Ruido Fest. That was like the most fun. Performing in Mexico with my band, with mini projects as well. That was another experience that I fell in love with, because it was in Mexico, so it was different. And when I did my first show as a solo act last year in May, I ended up getting a standing ovation, like an encore at the end. Yes, I was shocked because I was just an opener. I wasn't even one of the main acts, but
that's pretty cool, man. Then the main act is like, damn, we got to go on after this.
Yeah, that moment shocked me.
How do you navigate just being an opening act in comparison to like the headliner?
I don't know. I try not to think about
those things.
Okay. I always mostly focus on just have fun and put on a good show, and mostly just have fun. Just have fun. Because if I'm not having fun, then why am I doing it? Why am I driving like an hour and a half before? Or no, not even that. Why am I driving 2-3 hours before the show actually starts? Why am I coming in to do sound check? Yep. Why am I trying to find parking? And then I'm coming from the suburbs to Chicago. It's a trip. Like, why am I doing all of these things if I'm not going to actually do a good job and have fun with it? I can just stay home.
Yeah. And then what do you want to leave with your music? What's the legacy? Like with the podcast, right? Like, there's part of me that wants to leave a nugget for people who want to get into that field, right? Like are interested in like, I want to be a musician, or just interested in hearing what the life is like of a musician. But there's a part of me that's like, my children are going to be able to listen to this later and get to know a little part of me that I'm sharing through the podcast. Like, what do you want to leave with your music?
I want to leave that whatever you really want to do in life, to just go out and go for it, no matter what the circumstances are going on in your life, no matter if you are going through hardships, no matter if you feel that you're not being heard, or if you feel like you're being ignored or insignificant. You're not. Everybody is here for a reason. I've shared before that I don't believe too much in Catholicism. I don't really believe in God, but I do believe that if we're physically alive, we're here like on earth, there is a reason. Like, I don't think you were brought here just coincidentally. I don't believe anybody here was brought in just coincidentally. I feel like you were meant to be here. And that's my main message that I want to leave with people, is whatever you do in this life, do it well and just go for it.
Okay. And then how can people get in contact with you if they wanted to hear your music, or they wanted to see some of the upcoming shows, or they just want to see your growth process? Like, how can they tap in?
Yeah. So people can find me more active on my TikTok page. It's Música Emi Be Like. And on Instagram, since I'll be leaving to Mexico in November, now my focus will be, I really, really want to now grow my music while I'm over there. I want to tap into now doing more live shows and tap into bands and artists that are out in Mexico. So if people want to follow my journey, will be posting more on Instagram. But all of my music is on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, on practically every streaming platform.
Do you have a website?
I do. It's my solo.to. So it's like how do they call it? It's what other bands usually use, where they connect all of their links on one. But actually, let me pull it up, guys. I want to make sure I know which one it is.
Okay.
Okay. My website is solo.to -MEB like.
Okay.
And they'll find all of my music links on that website.
Word. Man, we really want to thank you for being part of the 500 and Growing podcast. You know, we appreciate the fact that you've been vulnerable and told the story. We wish you luck. And again, we are 500 and Growing. You can see more content on 500andgrowing.com. So we're produced by Where You At Productions. Where You At Productions is a mobile production company that comes in and features or specializes in podcasts, specializes in live events, and specializes in master classes. So if you have content and you want to get it down and have it featured on your website or on your YouTube channel, please reach out to Where You At Productions. And thank you very much for making it out to the 500 and Growing podcast. And we're out. Thank you.
Thank you.
500 and growing.
Podcast.
Dedicated to the underdog, cause I see you. Working on your craft, getting strong, cause I see you. Ready to set it off and on, cause I see you. Correcting all that is wrong, cause I see you. Dedicated to your craft, read and study the math. Making goals and taking a stand. Original, so you trailblaze a path. In tune with your inner master plan. Footworking through the obstacles of life. Sticking and moving, what's not right. Keeping it peace, but ready to fight. Protecting and keeping your light bright. In your eye and your mind, illuminating the blind. Seeing the signs. So brothers and sisters, get on your grind. Get on your grind. Get up off those knees, this is the time. We find ourselves, improve our health, and never settle. Take it into a higher level. Sound mind growth is mental. Purposeful movements, never accidental. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow at 500 and Growing Podcast on Instagram for updates, and also visit 500andgrowing.com for more creative content.
500 and growing.